Hi guys, welcome to this module on pivot tables. We're going to look at a basic pivot table, how to put filters on a pivot table, how to use these slicers, how to use the timeline, and how to do a graph. We would also look at how to create simple calculations and use some of the simple features that come with a pivot table. First of all though, here is a pivot table. 2 columns of information looking at this raw data down the bottom there. So here's the raw data. This could be 100,000 lines of information. The pivot table is summarizing that information in that small space there. These small icons are called slicers, and basically they're just filters. So for example, if I click on Anne Pearson, this will filter Anne Pearson sales. If I click on 2016, that is 2016 Anne Pearson. The graph is also reflecting that. I take the filter off, click that off, click first quarter, Anne Pearson sales, take Anne Pearson off, that's first quarter everybody. If I take that filter off and look at the timeline, maybe I can click on the timeline, that's October 2016. I can pull that across a little bit, give me a larger date range, but again that is a filter looking at this pivot data. So rather than filtering this data, putting filters on, taking filters off and so on, using a pivot table allows you to quickly click some options and get a result as quick as you need. I usually tell my class that the best way to use a pivot table is to have it like this all on one screen so you don't have to scroll up and down. I think if people are scrolling up and down like that or left and right, they're sort of losing the point of a pivot table, because that's the sort of thing that you would have to do on the raw data set perhaps. So it's a management tool, and the tool really should be one screen. If you need to analyze from another set of columns, maybe do another pivot table and look at that pivot table as a separate entity. Both pivot tables can be looking at the same data list. Now down the right hand side there you have the field list. So these are the fields from the raw data table, which I've just clicked on there several times. So these are the fields across the top there. These have to be filled in, you can't have a blank column. But once you've got that, you've got the option of bringing that information in by either ticking these little boxes or dragging and dropping these fields into the relevant boxes. So this is what a pivot table is. I'm just going to get rid of all these filters to show you how this works. So I'm not deleting any data by doing this. I'll get rid of the timeline, and then we'll recreate this example from scratch. So there's a basic pivot table. Many people ask me, how do I know where to put these fields? The answer to that is quite simple: you don't. It's called trial and error. So for example, if I put salesperson in there, that's gone a bit big on me and I'm beginning to need to start scrolling, although it's not too bad. It's more than I want to be doing. If I put salesperson into rows, what does that look like? That's even bigger. That's a list of everybody by every town, so I don't like that. So I'm just going to pull that out there. Maybe try quarter into columns. Quarter, that's okay, I could get away with that. Into location, don't like that. Maybe I'll put it into a filter and I'll put salesperson into filter. But this is the pivot process. You are pivoting these columns around this small grid to get the best solution for what you're looking for. So there's no right or wrong answer, but if it looks clunky and you're spending a lot of time getting the information, it's probably not set up correctly, and you probably need to just have a little tweak with these boxes and get them moved to the right place. What we're going to do now though is recreate a pivot table from scratch. So I've come onto the raw data and I'm going to put the pivot table to the right of this raw data. In real life though, I probably would put it onto a separate sheet as you saw there. But so you can see what's going on, I'm going to keep it all together. So I'm in the pivot table. I'm going to the Insert tab and selecting the first option, Pivot Table. Now it picks up the list A1 to E432, which is great, that's the entire list. However, if I had a data set that was growing or shrinking, I would have to keep coming in to edit the range to make sure it picked it up. So what I'm going to do is just quickly cancel that box and name this range. I'm just going to highlight the columns A, B, C, D and E, and then I'm going to call that data in the name box. When I press enter, I've named 1.5 million rows. Then I'm going to repeat the process, insert pivot table, but this time where it says the range, I'm going to type equals data, and that will pick that up. And then I'm going to, for this example, as I've already mentioned, I'm going to put it on the same sheet. So I'm going to put this into H4, click OK to that. So H4 is where it starts. I've left a bit of space there for some filters. If I had have put this into H1, the filters would have moved it down, so it doesn't matter really, but it's just a habit I have. So I want location to be in rows. That will give me a list of all the cities and the blanks at the bottom, which I can remove from the filter. I'll just drop that down and take the blanks off. You don't need to do that, but it just tidies this up a little bit. Now, whatever you're analysing in a pivot table, you bring into the values box. So I want to look at sales, so I've got a list of the sales, not formatted. Now, you need to format things through this box, sum of sales, and then the first option there, value field settings, and you can see there straight away you've got different options, so I could have count, average, max, min, etc. But for this little bit I want to go into number format and select accounting, click OK to that, and then OK again. So that's now formatted to pounds, and it will keep that formatting even if I have to refresh this data, which when you're using a pivot table you do need to do. So I'll just try and show you that. So if I delete some of these figures, this does not pick that up straight away. So when you work with a pivot table, the first thing you should do, unless it's set up to update on open, is refresh the data. So I've refreshed the data there, so now it's changed. I'll just do Control Z twice there, undo, to bring that back and carry on with this. So I want a filter for salesperson and a filter for quarter, like so, and that gives me the drop down list at the top. And Pearson, there's Ann Pearson sales. Ann Pearson first quarter sales, first quarter sales. Now if I double click on this grand total figure or any of these figures, it will pull off all Ann Pearson sales for the first quarter. All first quarter, all Ann Pearsons. And it's dropped it onto a separate sheet, as you can see there. And I can do that for anybody, but I'm just going to bring everybody back. Okay, bring that back. Click on all and OK and bring those back. So that's a full list again. Now, where I showed you on the demonstration sheet was slices. Now they live on the Analyze tab. I click there, insert slicer, and then you tick whichever slices you want. So for this example, I just want salesperson and quarter. That'll do. Click OK to that. I get these two boxes, and I'm just going to position them side by side, outside of the pivot table. This one's got blanks displayed, so I'm just going to right click on that one, go into slicer settings and tick this option, hide items with no data. You need to be careful with that one, just in case you want to display items with no data, but for this I don't, so I'm getting rid of that. And then these look or react exactly the same way as the old filters from previous versions. So I've clicked on Ann Pearson. If I hold my control key down, I can click on multiple people, and it actually shows me the people I've clicked there, whereas on this filter it just says multiple items, and I would have to drop the list down to see the ticks. To get rid of the filters, you click on these little red crosses and everything comes back. Now to do a graph or a chart on this, again up to the Analyze tab, over to where it says Pivot Chart. I'm just going to pick the default one, and I am actually going to move that onto a separate sheet. So right click on the space, move chart to a new sheet, chart 1, OK, and then it becomes a sheet with a chart only. But because I've got the filters on the pivot table, I have the ability to filter the chart. And when I filter the chart, if I go back to the raw data reflects that. So whichever area you filter, the other area will reflect the change. If you don't have these two filters up here or in the filters box, you will not get a filter option on the chart. They will not be there. Now the timeline, I want to insert a timeline, so I'm going to analyze timeline. I've only got one date field, so I'm just going to tick that one, and then I'm going to position that and elongate that along the bottom, and then basically you click on any date, or any month in this case, or drag to display data for that date range. And again, to take that off, you click the filter off. So there's a timeline. So that is basically how you create a pivot table. If you accidentally lose this, it's either because you've clicked out of the pivot table, or if you are in the pivot table, you may have accidentally clicked the field list off at the top there, which I'm clicking back on. Just be careful of that. Now I want to do a second example, so I'm going to practice one. On this example, I want to show you a pivot table that's going to display how many courses of each type that I have completed and how much money did I get. So I'm in the list. I go insert pivot table. This time I'm going to let it pick up the list for this demonstration. I'm not going to name the range, and I'm going to again pick this worksheet. So I'm going to put it into F3, clicking OK to that. I want a list of courses, so that will give me a list of courses, but I also want to analyze the number of courses. So this is a text field, so when I let go it's going to say count of courses. If it didn't, I would need to change it. Cost, so it's going to give me the cost, and again I'm going to click on sum of cost, go into value field settings and number format to format that to accounting, so it displays in pounds. Click OK. And I want location as a filter. Now what I have here is a list of courses, but I want to know now which of these courses are Microsoft Office and which are not. They're all Microsoft courses, but for example Project, which I'm going to attempt to move to the bottom by dragging it, and Visio, so I need to get this symbol before I can move it, and then I can just drag it down. I will drag that down to the very bottom. These two courses are not Microsoft Office, but these top 5 are Microsoft Office. So I'm going to highlight those top 5, I'm going to right click and select group. I'll create a group. Now when I create a group, everything else becomes a group of itself, so project, Visio, Visio. But I want those two to also be a group. So right click group, and then I'm going to name those two groups. First one can be MSO, Microsoft Office, and the second one can be non-MSO. And while I'm tidying this up, I'm going to type products up there, and I want to put courses there. I can't use the word course because that's there. You can't use the same name as a column, but I can put courses, and I can put costs. I also want to use one of the design features and just colour this up a little bit. Pick that one. So that's a simple pivot table with some groups, and when I click these groups down with these little minuses, if I double click on these numbers, which I will do, it will tell me that there were 21 courses, and these are those courses. So this has only pulled off the Microsoft Office courses, part of group 1 or Microsoft Office. Go back to there, and I can expand that. Now if I put a graph on this one, so analyze pivot chart, I actually don't want this sort of graph because I can't see the courses, so I'm going to go for a combo chart, and I want courses to be a line, and I want it to be on a secondary axis, and I want costs to be a column, so I have a graph like that. Click OK to that, and then as we did before, I'm going to right click on that and move that chart to its own sheet. Click OK to that to get it out of the way. But there's the graph. And now back to this. I want to do a simple calculation on these figures. So the temptation is to do calculations when you first get into pivot tables is to sit outside of the pivot table and do a formula like this. So if I click on that cell and do times 1.1, for example, that will give me 10% markup on that figure, that axis cost. But look at that, it's looking at costs, it's looking at cost axis. If I pull that down, it's doing exactly the same. It's an absolute reference, so I would need to click into each one and do the formula again and again and again, which I'm not going to do. And also, if I do a filter and there isn't an axis course in that particular location, I'm going to get this ref coming up. So although it's doable, it is not best practice. It's okay if you're not going to be filtering the list, you'll get away with that, but a better way would be to actually do it within the pivot table itself. So to do that, I'm going up to Analyze, I'm going up to Field and Item Sets, and I'm picking Calculated Field. Now this first field, I'm going to call it Markup, and the form is going to be double click on Costs. Let's get rid of that 0. So double click on Costs and then times 1.1. That's what I want, a 10% markup. OK to that. Change the label just with markup. Now I can't have the word markup, but I can have a space after it and it will let me do that. But there gives you a 10% markup. Now if I do another one to show profit, if I go back into Field and Item Sets, call this Profit, it's going to be, just get rid of that, markup minus cost. Click OK to that. Call that Profit with a space. That gives you the profit. And then the last thing I'm going to do in this particular example is I'm going to add a column there that's going to show me the percentage, or which is the best course. This is sorted at the moment, but I want to know what the percentage is of the totals. So what I need to do that is I need to bring cost back down into this box at the bottom there. So I'm dropping that in. It says sum of cost 2. That one. I'm clicking on that. I'm going into value field settings, and then I'm changing it to show it as a percentage of the column total. So show value as percentage of column total, and then the label, I'm just going to put a label in there so it saves me having to do it later on. And then I click OK, and I get it displaying like so. Now if I sort this list, just go to data and do actually Z to A, so that's sorted it, so is the percentage, and then it does it again within the other group. So that's a very simple example of two pivot tables, one with grouping and one with simple calculations. I hope you've enjoyed this little video, and if you have, please subscribe below, and I will hopefully try and produce 1 or 2 videos every week. Thank you for your time.